Oregon and Ohio State, the favorites in the Big Ten. Who feels better after spring practice? Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for a crossover episode of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Buckeyes. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. That is Jay Stevens of Locked On Buckeyes. And thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks or the Buckeyes, depending on where you are listening to or watching this show. Right now, Jay, post-spring football, Ohio State feels how good? Because I got to say, Oregon feels incredibly confident, both with how the quarterback room looks, with how the skill positions look, with how the defensive line looks. Everything in the spring game confirmed what I've talked about all offseason. This is going to be a very good Oregon team. How confident does Ohio State feel after spring practice?
Just as confident as Oregon does, if not even better, an even higher level of confidence. Ryan Day feels like, and this is back in February before spring practice started, he said that he felt like at that time they had enough to win a national championship. They may be able to say, Jay, like, isn't that a lofty statement? But that's what Ryan Day's been building towards for this moment. You don't go out and get Caleb Downs and Quinshon Judkins and the guys that got in the portal if that's not your goal. If you're just trying to go out there and win conference, beat Michigan, but lose the first round of the playoff, you don't go out and get all these guys. Like, you just don't do that. Ryan Day is setting this up to be a team that can make the most noise in a season any Ryan Day team has ever made in a single season. So Ryan Day is confident, the players are confident, the team is confident, the coaches are confident that they'll do big things in 2024, like beating Oregon in the middle of the season.
Yeah, that October 12th game, certainly something we'll talk about later. I'll get your thoughts on the line shifting because I was puzzled by that, to say the least. But, you know, the betting markets say that Oregon and Ohio State are the top two teams in the Big Ten. Is that how you feel, Jay? Because I look at the Big Ten and say, look, it's very top heavy. I think once you get to the middle of the conference, it's a little bit weak, depending on how good Wisconsin is going to be this year. But I think USC will be a little bit better than their win total would indicate at 7.5. I'd go over that in a heartbeat. I think USC revamping that side of the ball will be vastly improved. But Michigan is the team that just continues to get a very high level of respect, of, you know, kind of ingrained support or an understanding, there's a top 10, 15 team. Whereas a Washington, who is in a similar spot, though not as well off in terms of what their team was last year to this year as Michigan is, how big of a threat do you think anyone else can be in the Big Ten to Oregon and Ohio State?
I mean, there's somewhat of a threat, but I wouldn't say, like, there's maybe one or two teams that might be a bigger threat than others. But you mentioned the Big Ten being very top heavy. That's every single season. Like, every year it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Penn State, it's the others. Now, granted, that's the Big Ten East. Big Ten West, you had Iowa, Wisconsin, and occasionally Northwestern, which is still like, what is this? But that's not going to be the case anymore. So you have the situation where it's still going to be top heavy, but Washington is not what Washington was going to be last year. USC will be better, but I don't think USC can crack the top of the Big Ten yet. It's still going to be very, very top heavy. And I don't think Michigan's going to be there. Maybe Wisconsin, maybe Penn State. But right now, I think it's Ohio State and Oregon, and it's going to be hard for anybody else to crack the top, to be a contender, to be playing for the championship of the Big Ten in the winter first weekend, I think in December, is the game.
That sounds right. We should probably know that off the top of our heads, but indeed, it's so very far away. But the regular season matchup on October 12th is going to be started for Ohio State by whom, Jay?
Ask that again, please.
But the game against Oregon will be started at quarterback by whom?
Will Howard. I wanted to make sure that I heard that correctly before I made a statement.
Gotcha. Okay, so Look, I just look at what Ohio State's quarterback situation has been throughout the spring, and I was puzzled when there was ever a question because Will Howard went there, and I thought that was an automatic lock, and then it wasn't. Has there been any further clarification, any other indication that it will be Howard and there's no competition from Devin Brown or Julian Sayin?
I think there's competition about the things that Ryan Day is saying. I don't think in-house. This is similar to last season. I think in-house things are a little bit different than the way that things are in practice or they were in the spring game. Last year, I didn't think Devin Brown was going to be the starting quarterback, and I said on the show, I think this is with no knowledge. It's just my gut telling me. I felt like in-house Kyle McCord was the guy, but Ryan Day said something this year that made it seem like no, Kyle McCord was not the guy, which is why the quarterback competition went into the season. But neither guy had played significant ball for a long period of time. So that kind of makes sense. I would be shocked if Ryan Day said, oh, Will Howard comes in, won the Big 12, he did this or did that. All of a sudden, like, oh, well, Devin Brown, you're the guy, or Sand, you're the guy. I just don't see that happening. Will Howard's done too much good playing of football to come in here with the guys that are behind him and say, oh, well, I'm just going to lay an egg and let these guys jump me in the depth chart. I just don't see that happening. And also, I think his experience is needed for this team at the quarterback position. It's not like he's a running back or receiver. He is the leader of the offense, and you need a guy that's going to be able to lead the team in hostile environments like what the Buckeyes will face in Autzen Stadium so that the team can stay level-headed, so they don't get derailed or rattled by the fans and the crowd, which will be wild and crazy and make it all kind of racket to make things difficult for the Buckeyes offense. You need Will Howard's experience. Now, if Will Howard just opens the season up and lays an egg and starts playing really bad football, I may have some conversations on the show about maybe Will Howard's not the guy. But I also am a person, I don't think 2 games or 3 games is enough unless you're like trash for me to say, no, pull him. Like I try to be very cautious about when I say pull a guy and when I say, oh, keep him in based off the situations there. But I think Will Howard's a guy. I think he'll be going in there starting. And I said recently on the show, and I'll say it again here for you, Spencer, once again, the Everydays are Locked On Buckeyes hear this all the time. I believe that Will Howard is ready for the test to go to Autzen Stadium and to battle with the Ducks.
And that's the biggest area where I feel more confident in Oregon than Ohio State coming out of spring. Because even if Will Howard's the guy, which you and I agree is going to be the plan, and I like Will Howard. I thought he was one of the more high-profile transfers given his experience. I think he's very solid. I think Dillon Gabriel is better. And so when you look at where these two teams are and the way the coaches have built the rosters, neither one have major glaring questions or just huge weaknesses that lead you to believe, well, you know, a team is going to exploit this or they still need that. They're trying to find a transfer here. Like, no, they're done. Their roster completion is all put together on both sides. And so then you give me Oregon at home. You give me Oregon with who I perceive to be the better quarterback in Dillon Gabriel, who's got that big game experience from a year ago against Texas and some other matchups in the Big 12. I like that. That's the biggest reason why I look at these teams right now and say, I think Oregon should be favored over Ohio State in the Big Ten title odds, and of course at home, which we'll talk about later. But still, even though these rosters are very good, Jay, I'm sure you and I can find questions about, well, what about this? What about that guy? What about the third string safety if the first 2 get hurt? We're going to get to the biggest questions looming for these teams right after this. First, let's get to our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality candidates that are right for the role, just like looking around in the transfer portal. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Jay, biggest questions for Oregon and Ohio State. Let's go back and forth here. I'll go to you first. Your biggest question outside of the quarterback position, which we've already talked about for Ohio State roster-wise, is what?
Biggest question for Oregon for the roster?
No, for Ohio State.
Oh, my biggest question for Ohio State's roster.
Yes, yeah.
Oh wow. Oh wow, that was a curveball. Spencer, I was not ready for that. My biggest question for Ohio State's roster is linebackers. And that's one every day is like, Jay, doing this again? Yeah, I have to. Spencer's asking the questions. Linebackers to me is still one of those areas where you have one leader and the other guys are unproven at that spot. It's very similar to receiver, but I think in that room there's more talent at the top, even though it's unproven. There's more talent that we feel we're going to get. So it's more of a concrete thing. At linebackers, outside of Cody Simon, the Buckeyes don't have anybody that has played consistent linebacker for Ohio State. That concerns me. That kind of is a little worrisome when you go on the road to Oregon, or you deal with Penn State, or you deal with Michigan. Even though Michigan's going to be down a little bit of talent, they're still going to be a good football team. If you don't have good linebacker play, it doesn't matter how good your D-line is or your secondary. An opposing offense will be able to take apart and pick apart a good offense, at least, will be able to pick apart that level of the defense. So for me, it is the linebackers, and I'm a little wait and see, but also I'm a little cautious, and I'm going to be very, very critical of that position because this is what Ryan Day has done. If you're going to ride with Cody Simon and Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks, and no one's really proven, and you haven't gone out there and got a guy from the portal yet, of course I want to be a little bit cautious and a little concerned about what's going to happen when those guys get on the field in the fall.
All right, so my question about Ohio State is, or one of them, is how Chip Kelly fits into this offense. Because he and Ryan Day are, cut from the same mold. They fall not far from the same tree. They've got a long history together. Now, Ryan Day's had some really prolific passing attacks over the last couple of seasons. I look at this Ohio State receiving core. You may correct me if I'm wrong here. Of course, you're the Ohio State guy. This is not a Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba level receiving core. It is, however, the best backfield in all of college football. And Chip Kelly, for all the talk about what his offense is and what he wants it to be, he wants to run the football. And Oregon fans know this very well. The foundation of Chip Kelly's offense is the run to set up the play action pass. That's where he is at his best. How do you see that dynamic playing out where Ryan Day has liked throwing the ball a lot over the last several years, but has now given up play calling duties, brought in Chip Kelly, who likes to run the ball?
Oh, dude, I think it's going to work out so well. I don't think Ryan Day would have given up play calling for just any guy. And I think he would have done it for Bill O'Brien. Don't get me wrong. Like, Bill O'Brien is not Chip Kelly, doesn't have the respect that Chip Kelly has, as far as a lot of college football people believe Chip Kelly's a better offensive mind and better play caller and runs better offenses than Bill O'Brien. That's not saying Bill O'Brien's bad. I think Bill O'Brien does not get the respect he deserves at a college football level. If you look at his history, he's gotten the best out of a lot of quarterbacks throughout numerous quarterbacks' careers, and it's under Bill O'Brien's watch. So that's a lot to say about a lot of guys that weren't the best quarterbacks.
And by the way, on the Bill O'Brien front, if you look at what he did with the Houston Texans and then what happened after he left, they went from perennial playoff team to taking your guy CJ Stroud, who I was a big fan of coming out of college, number 2 overall. That's going very well. It's taken them a minute. Bill O'Brien's had like 5 jobs, it feels like, since the Texans were last good. So I agree. I just feel the need to put that out there because he's one of those guys. He and Gus Malzahn, I just feel like they get a bad reputation coaching-wise, and I absolutely will not stand for it. Anyway.
Can't stand for it. No, but I think it'll be well. I think that Chip Kelly's desire to run the ball is a big reason why I am leaning into Will Howard starting for Ohio State. Will Howard is not a Stroud passer, doesn't throw the ball like Dwayne Haskins, but he doesn't need to in this offense with the way that Chip Kelly is going to run it. But you add in Henderson and Judkins together, I think that trio is going to be fun to watch. And as the running game gets back to what an Ohio State running game needs to be and what Ohio State fans expect it to be, you're also going to find that that's going to open up passing lanes and passing windows for Egbuka, for Carnell Tate, for Jeremiah Smith, for Brandon Ennis, and the other receivers that might step on the field because of Chip Kelly's desire to run the ball. So, no, it will not be the typical Ryan Day offense. I don't think it would have been that way if Bill O'Brien was the OC for Ohio State. I am expecting this offense to be run heavy, and I am expecting Chip Kelly to take advantage of the talent that Ohio State currently has.
To flip this over to Oregon, I'd say the biggest question I have is the safety room, which gives me, frankly, a little bit of confidence going into the Ohio State game, if that's the biggest question I have for Oregon's defense, which it is. I think the corners go legitimately 5 to 6 deep at the two outside corner spots. I think the nickel position is going to be pretty solid. The linebackers, I feel really good at the top. Defensive line, I feel great at the top. I feel great about the depth. The safeties, I feel solid, but not great about at the top of that depth chart. And as you go down, you're going to have some inexperienced guys, whether that's Peyton Woodyard, whether that's Aaron Flowers, whether that's Tyler Turner. Like one of those three guys who have freshmen next to their name, Tyler Turner's a redshirt, the other two are true freshmen. One of those guys is going to see the field regularly for the Ducks. He might not be starting, but one of those guys is going to be a factor on the defense. He just has to be. And it's especially going to be the case if Kobe Savage, the Kansas State transfer, would end up getting hurt. Now, Solomon Davis has been training at the safety position as well. He's been a corner since he got to Oregon in the class of 2023. So maybe that's a guy who plays a little bit more over the top. But the reason I feel better about that going into this version of Ohio State is because they are more run-centric. It's because they want to get the ball downhill and they want to establish a ground game. Does it feel like they don't quite have the same explosive playmaking capability with Will Howard and Emeka Egbuka as, you know, your QB1 and wide receiver 1 going into this year? And is Egbuka the number 1 receiver?
He is. He is the number 1 receiver. You know, Brian Smith does recruiting for us at Locked On. Brian Smith believes that Jeremiah Smith will be the number 1 receiver for Ohio State at the end of the season.
I can see that.
And we'll have some of the best numbers in the country at the end of the season. And that's not to say that he's going to be the first receiver at Ohio State to start the year. But once that bad boy gets rolling, Jeremiah Smith could have better numbers than Egbuka at the end of the year. But explosion is, if it's all air attack, and that's where you get your explosive numbers, that's not what Ohio State's going to be this year. That's not saying that air attack will not be good or will not be above average. It just won't be Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba being the receivers for Ohio State. Now, if you can allow some runs to be in there and use those to be classified as explosive, then we're getting to what Chip Kelly is going to have. But no, it will not be the typical quarterback 1, wide receiver 1, making opposing defenses look silly. I don't think it'll be that type of explosive offense at Ohio State. More diversity is maybe the proper way to use it, which will be fun to watch because, dude, I have been calling and pounding the table every year, sometimes every week, to run the ball more, and we finally get it this year.
Yeah, and that backfield is as good as it gets. And Oregon's backfield is also very good with Jordan James, Noah Whittington, and then maybe a guy like Jay Harris, who was a D2 All-American, or Jaden Lamar, former 4-star recruit who's going into his second year of college football. I like Oregon's backfield. I absolutely love Oregon's offensive line. And stick around because Jay and I are going to talk about the battle in the trenches, which may very well define the October 12th meeting in Eugene. First, let's talk about what you need to be a great investor. That is Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They're the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. You got to check them out if you want to become more engaged, more informed about the finance scene. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. So the last time Oregon and Ohio State met on the field, Jay, was 2021. The time before...
No. Don't bring this up. No. I didn't come on this show.
I was being fair.
Yeah.
I was about to mention the time before that was 2014. The point that I am making, though I understand...
Don't forget that Rose Bowl either.
Not forgetting that in 2009. But I didn't look at the numbers for that one, or at least they're not as fresh in my memory because I was but a wee lad when that game took place. But I was there in person, and I wasn't going home particularly happy. In each of the last two meetings, Jay, the team that has won the ground game has won the game. You think CJ Verdell running wild in 2021 if you're an Oregon fan. You think Ezekiel Elliott running wild in 2014, technically 2015, if you are a Buckeyes fan. So going into this game, I've only got that short amount of history to go on, but feels like whoever wins the ground game, whoever is the more physical team, more dominant team at the line of scrimmage, ends up winning the game. Do you think that's the case when they meet on October 12th?
Yeah, that's football. This isn't just that game. If you look at the history of the sport, especially in just take the big games, not take the cupcakes and you're playing your Marshalls or whoever you might be playing. Let's just simply look at the big games. In big games in college football, top 25 ranked games in the conference championship game or the CFP. If you win the ground game, 9 times out of 10, you're going to win the game, and you won because you won the battle in the trenches. That's huge. And I do think this year that battle's going to be pretty tough, pretty intense. I do think Ohio. Now, I have been critical of Henderson. I think he'll be better this year. But I also think that Judkins is going to make Henderson even better because the wear and tear Henderson has taken on his body, he won't have to endure this year. And I do think that those two guys together will be phenomenal. Well, phenomenal early. I think they'll be just fine in the game against Oregon. I know it's on the road. I don't know if they've announced what network will broadcast that game. I expect it to be a Fox game, but still, I think Fox will make that a night game for people in Oregon, not in a morning kickoff for people out there in Oregon, and I don't blame them for that. But I do think, though, yes, the team that wins the battle in the trenches will win this game.
I look at where Oregon is at on both sides of the line of scrimmage, and I feel exceptionally confident. You've got basically 4 starters back from last year's offensive line. You lost Stephen Jones and Jackson Powers-Johnson, but Jones was replaceable at any point in time with Iapani Lalaulu, who slides over to play center this year. He also subbed in regularly for Marcus Harper at left guard, so I consider him a starter. So I've got 4 starters back on an offensive line that finished, I think, top 8, 10, 12-ish for the Joe Moore Award given to the best offensive line in college football. Then you look at the defensive line. Oregon was vastly improved last year. They were a really good unit. They got after the quarterback. They did not get killed on the ground. I think their defensive line is even better this year, especially getting Derek Harmon, a guy who you've seen play before at Michigan State. That's not a small addition there. Jamari Caldwell, the Houston transfer, is also a beast, and I think is right now amongst Oregon fans kind of flying under the radar. Jordan Birch is going to play on Sundays after this season. And then you've got the edge guys who really go 5 deep if you factor in 5-star true freshman Elijah Rushing this year, which you don't have to because then you go 4 deep with the other guys. So when you look at Ohio State in the trenches, Jay, how do you feel about those 2 units on either side of the line of scrimmage? Because I'm just telling you from an Oregon standpoint, Duck fans cannot feel a lot better about how they're going to match up in the Big Ten.
So defensively, let's start defense first. Ohio State, and I say every day we get this stuff all the time. Ohio State's defensive linemen, they're going to get 4 guys drafted in the upcoming draft in 2025. Both defensive ends are locks to be second-round picks right now. I think Tuimoloau, second-round pick. Jack Sawyer, second-round pick. Tyleik Williams will probably be a first-round pick. If he keeps playing and progressing like he is, he will be a first-round pick. And then Ty Hamilton is one of those guys where you're probably lesser known. His brother, Devon Hamilton, was also an Ohio State Buckeye, now playing in the NFL. In Devon Hamilton's final year, took a leap in the right way that ultimately got him drafted. I believe Ty Hamilton will be the same way, probably a day 3 pick. So defensive line, I think they're full of disruptors. They're full of guys that are ready to wreak havoc, and I think that they'll be one of the better defensive lines in the conference this year, even in an expanded Big Ten. Offensive line is a different question. Now, you have 4 of your 5 returning starters from last year still on this team, so it's like, wait, why is there a question? Left tackle Josh Simmons, it was a transfer from San Diego State, played good last year once he got his feet under his belt to realize how to play at this level. He is going to be fine. Left guard Donovan Jackson has not lived up to his recruiting, has not lived up to the hype. I wonder and I question how if he'll get better in the upcoming season. You bring in a transfer in Spencer McLaughlin from Alabama. I don't think he should be center.
Great last name. Great last name, that guy.
It is a great
top
last
tier
name. Now, I don't think he was a great center. I think he's a better guard. I think he'll be a better at guard than center. But then you have Carson Hinzman, who I think is a better center, and Josh Fryer, who I don't think is a good right tackle, better at guard, but I don't think he's the best option to be the right guard. So you have 4 of your 5 starters from a year ago still on this team, but there's a lot of question marks there. And my belief and trust that Ohio State coaches will put the right guys in the right positions is not very high right now. So it's very weird. I have great confidence in the D-line. I got questions still about the O-line at Ohio State.
A question came in from an Oregon fan about Ohio State, about Ryan Day, saying he's clearly a great coach that's doing a great job. What's the pulse of the coaching future? Is it loudmouth casual fans or true fans that question him? Your take on that is what?
No. So I don't really talk for casuals because I ain't that, and I'll never be one of them when it comes to this team. I'll speak for the diehards, or at least the people that are like myself that try to be as realistic as possible. Ryan Day's on the hot seat. And I said it after the Michigan loss. I was even on a hotter seat after the Missouri loss in the Cotton Bowl. If this man loses to Michigan once again, what are you keeping him for? As great of a coach as he is, and you are Ohio State, and you're able to get whoever you want. If you lose 4 in a row to Michigan, what are you doing? Especially when you have a new AD in Ross Bjork who comes to Texas A&M, who understands what it is to spend a whole lot of money on a football program. That can't happen, especially when Michigan's going through losing Harbaugh. They promoted Sharon Moore. They're not going to be the team that they were last year over the past few years. We don't think they're cheating anymore, but nobody truly knows that they're cheating still. And if they are cheating or if they're not, whatever it is, they got caught. They're going to get hammered for it with sanctions from the NCAA. You can't lose once again. And I'm a person, even going into 11-0 last year against Michigan, I was still concerned and thought, hey, yeah, Ohio State, they're really good, but I don't know if they're going to win this game. I don't want to go in that game again this year and have that same feeling. That's just me as a fan and as an analyst. I don't want to go into that game with that feeling. However, the one way Ryan Day can redeem himself, if he loses that game, goes on to win conference, goes on to win the national championship, it's kind of hard to fire a guy that's lost 1 game and won the Natty. So as much as I would say like Ryan Day's fired after losing to Michigan, if you go on and still find a way to play in the Big Ten Conference Championship, let's just say it's against Oregon, you beat Oregon, and then all of a sudden both Oregon and Ohio State, want to be friendly here, as friendly as I can be, are still in the playoff, and then all of a sudden Ohio State goes on to win the Natty, it's going to be very, 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 very hard to fire him if you lose to your rival, your biggest rival, and still win the national championship. So my thought is if you lose to Michigan, man, that seat's even hotter than it already is. No matter how great these offseason moves are, you have to win that game.
Yeah, and I think with Michigan not expected to be as good as last year, which they shouldn't be, that adds to the pressure of that game. Yes. Let's close on this, Jay. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like there's more pressure to beat Michigan But given that that game's at home, the Oregon game is on the road, where Ohio State is now favored. The Oregon game is a tougher win for Ohio State, but it's not as important as the Michigan win.
I think the Michigan win's tougher. I think even though Oregon may be a better football
You
team,
think Michigan at home is a tougher game for Ohio State to win this year than Oregon on the road?
I don't think you realize what is going to be said about this team that week and throughout the offseason.
That's true.
And what even though it's at home, the last time these two teams played in the shoe at Ohio State, Michigan won the game. So I don't think the venue truly matters in this senior class. They have not beaten Michigan. And so there's a lot riding on this game. And plus, that game's the players always say it, that game is always the most physical game and the most mentally tough game that players have ever played. No matter if it's a really good Penn State team, really good Oregon team, whatever. That game is always the toughest game of the year. Then you add in losing 3 in a row. You add in what it would mean to simply beat them if you are Denzel Burke or Tuimoloau or Sawyer or any of those guys that are in that recruiting class. That game is going to be tougher.
That's Jay Stevens, Locked on Buckeyes. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked on Ducks. Jay, thanks so much for getting together. Always a fun time. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Jay, that was kind of a hot take there to end the show. I don't think Oregon fans are going to like that take very much, but you know what? That's why we talk, we debate. Thank you, Jay.
Hey, man, I really enjoyed it. Got to do it again soon.
Abso-freaking-lutely. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day. And for all my Oregon fans, as always, go Ducks.
Go Bucks.